All right, we're live, Hans.
We're live.
The ocean was cold this morning. It was raining. Oh, it was very cold.
You felt the oh yeah, the ocean was not. Yeah, it's true.
You know, when we first got in, man, it was bem gelada, as they might say in Portuguese. And man, I caught some great waves. It was a rough sea today.
The sea was wild that day, my friends.
So, I titled this episode "Flowerboys."
So did I.
Hans, first I wrote in there "flower men," and I was like, well, I can't call them men. I don't feel that they're men. And so I said "flower boys," but the guys we're going to talk about, like, I wouldn't want to insult flowers by even putting them in the same name. So I've got some judgments, okay? I've got some judgments, but it's a stand for men. It's a stand for men. And the kind of men we're talking about, and I'm not just going to label them as like that's the totality of who they are, but are at a phase in their life, and if they're not careful, it could become them for the rest of their life, is they are, again, I'm tempted to not even use the word men, but they're men who won't face you and make things right. They won't, something happens, they give their word, there's a deal, now there's a conflict, they won't face you, they won't make things right, and if they do say that agree to make things right, they go home and talk to their wife or whatever, it changes or their feelings change, and then they don't do it, and there's no man there, there's no one to meet you, there's no one to keep the agreement.
Are you talking about like the disappearing, or are you talking about like not keeping your word?
The disappearing. I mean, I think sometimes words, the words we give get broken, but not even to show up to make it right and avoid facing you.
Not addressing the issue.
And it's like there's nothing there. There's not a man there. It's all mushy and...
Wow. Yeah, I have some stories about that.
Well, this came up before we went live. I have a Turkish friend of mine who lives in Fairfield, Iowa, where there's a meditation university. It's a Maharishi or something like this. Anyway, so there's a lot of meditators, there's a lot of people into like spirituality, high vibrations, this sort of thing. And he was in business with this guy, and he was an older guy. Turns out he's from, the 60s. And I came up with the name like Flowerboys because it goes back to, the late 60s was like flower power. Everything was about flowers and, emotions and being free and...
all good values.
Yes, all of this. And I find that it's a lot of these guys from that era, actually, who have no backbone, can't give their word, won't show up, won't get it done. And they're pretty much just going to melt at whatever their woman says or whatever their emotions say, and there's no man there.
And I'm interested in the why. I'm interested in like what is going on there, because I would love to also solve it.
Yes.
You want to say that?
You mentioned a couple of guys. If you could mention one or two briefly.
Yeah. So this thing has haunted me since 15 years. I had a writing. I was part of a writing company with a. I'm gonna call names. I'm gonna say it. Maybe this is a way. You never know. Because I'm genuinely curious what's going on there, and I'm genuinely curious how I can show up, how I can make a miracle happen there. So I had a writing company with Joe. If you're watching, Joe, if anyone of the friends of Joe watches, you could give it to him. And with a couple of guys, and we had a writing company, and we did all kinds of writing, translations. We wrote reviews. Anyway, at some point, Joe asked me to borrow money for the company, I believe. Yes, for the company, and I borrowed 20,000.
You lent him.
I lent him. Me and my father each lent 10,000.
All
right?
Euros.
And to this day, it's not given back. And it's completely unaddressed.
Yes.
And he would speak well of my father and of me, and then like, what about the money? You know? And he has never given it back. And whenever I try to address it, in Belgium, he's like elusive. He's gone, or he's not addressing the message, or you know, it's I would have to like go and knock on his door.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I've been there also, you know. And it's just, it's hard to describe because people are gonna say, well, just show up and make it happen, but there's like a disappearing act,
yes.
You know, in words and I'm baffled. I'm baffled by how, like, what is happening there for him, that he chooses to live with that.
Yes.
You know, because I don't understand it. Like, what a burden that must be. I'm imagining what a burden that must be for him. You know, and I believe like one day he said something about like he has trouble with money, you know. So, and he has a family and wants to feed them and whatever. So that is more important. You know?
Yes.
And yeah, this is all right. But the fact that is left unaddressed by him, that towards me.
It's completely outside of my world, your world. We don't get how you could hold your head up and live life and go about your life without addressing that. And for me, the way I understand it is, and I asked you about his relationship with his father, because I see it in most cases as a judgment that they have of the father or of the masculine. And this is also where the honor window comes in, you know. So using the honor window this is about becoming the full man or the full individual. And it's so important to honor thy mother and thy father, not just for the sake of the mother and the father, but for your own development.
Are you saying it's because of the judgments of the father that this happens, or are you saying they coincide? They're signs of the same thing. It's because there's a judgment towards the masculine, say, that this becomes also possible, that you don't hold your word, or
your father when you're growing up is the masculine in a way.
Yes.
So you grow up, having those deep judgments against your father, especially if your father was a masculine man. Not all men are, right? But, because your father is kind of that force. He's the protector, he's the provider, he's the, he's the one that to the woman often seems, he's too mean, or he's too hard, or he's too aggressive, or he's too this, or he's too that. And so the son doesn't want to show up in any of those kind of ways. And it creates a barrier inside of him emotionally, psychologically. He doesn't want to go anywhere near looking like his father.
Yes.
But he needs those traits that go with those judgments.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I don't know how his father was. I didn't know his father, but I do know that he hates his father, and his father died and he didn't go to the funeral, and he really has resentment till this day.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes. And there were, this guy I mentioned, this flower guy from the 60s. I think a lot of that movement in the 60s was a judgment against their fathers, in society, and that kind of, I think their fathers were probably from the greatest generation, the World War II guys, and all this, very masculine, very, it was a whole different world back then. And that movement in a lot of ways was a rejection of everything structured and formal and discipline and all of that into just love and music and psychedelics and all of this. But it's not that those things are wrong or bad, or that
Right.
freedom or whatever is a negative thing. But what I'm speaking to is the rejection of
Right.
and judgment of the masculine.
I would stay there, you know, instead of bringing all the other labels in, because that makes it not only for me more dangerous and unclear. You know, what I do see that
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Like if you would bring in, say, psychedelics and love and freedom, you know, I could see all of those could be great values, you know.
Sure,
but the rejection of the masculine.
Well, I'm painting the picture. They're not just going towards that; they're going away from the other.
Right.
You know, so.
But that's the interesting part, like how that could be a rejection of the masculine. And what do you mean by that? Is what a rejection of what? Like the stand, being upright, keeping your word. Whatever comes with the masculine, what would that be? You know, that's what's interesting. You know, and then, yeah, for sure had many instances of this. And we asked, your question was, and I have this too, how can you recognize it? You know, how can you recognize it? And to me, like beforehand, and
yes.
No, don't go into a deal with that, or
yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I have another guy. In fact, kind of my most painful business deal gone south, let's say, was with a guy who was also from that generation, and he was and that wasn't Sausalito, but just north of San Francisco. There, I forget the word for it, but I gave him $20,000 to deliver something really important, like the most important thing I'd ever done for my business. I was doing an event for conscientious objectors and post-traumatic war veterans, 2010, and I was going to gift it. And like, there's suicidal guys, there's lives on the line, and he knows how important it is. And he doesn't show up. He doesn't do his job. He doesn't, like, there's no man there. There's, you know, he can't give his word to do it. He won't show up and confront me and face it and make it right. And it's just like this dealing with mush, you know? And it was, it brought up so much anger in me. But this guy was very much, I would call him kind of like the male feminist type of guy who's just like all with the ladies and everything that they want, and it's like kind of like everything female is positive. Everything. You kind of like worship the female without criticism, without any critical thought, without any objection, without anything. And I think that it kind of like in a sleazy way, you know, just like almost doing that to get what he wants. Mm-hmm. You know, that was kind of my assessment of him. But
become one of the girls.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it's, you know, as we're talking to men here who may listen or watch this, one, it's a warning to not become that guy that other men can't count on. Grave consequences in your life. You know, it's gonna really limit the brotherhood that you have. Period. And you know, men who are, yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe I shouldn't have let you interrupt me. No, the great interesting thing is like, how do we know? And then I realized in my life, it's very hard to know, like, who not to get into a deal with, or because there are very few men who keep their words. Like, to me, in my experience, I have a lifelong of meeting guys who don't keep their word. And every time I'm like, I feel betrayed, I'm baffled, I'm like, what the fuck? What am I doing? You know, how am I insane am I insane that no guy really wants to show up as an ally? Am I insane that in my world there's so few men, you know? There's so few allies. And so
who have you been hanging out with?
it's incredible. But then, you know, now I would say I know, you know, because now I've experienced what it means to be an ally. Now I've experienced what it is, you know. Okay, I feel this trust, and it's different than what I felt before when I was in a agreement or in a working business relationship with those men. I can feel there's a difference there, you know, but I wouldn't have known it before. I wouldn't have known it. So I think right now that I would see the signs, but for a big part of my life, I wouldn't. I would not know, because I didn't have great examples. I wasn't educated in it. You know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of consequences to a man who doesn't, well, I would say become a man, because I don't think of those people as men. I don't think of those guys as actual men. You know, to me, what it is to be a man is to keep your word, and when you fail to do that, you show up and you make it right, and you'll face people and you'll do what it takes. So, yeah, and oftentimes, I think a good sign is a man who doesn't have brothers. Like, he doesn't have groups of men who call him out. He doesn't have those.
That's a great sign.
Yes.
Huh. That's a great way. Don't go into a deal with a guy who doesn't have brothers. You see if you can trust the man. See if he has allies. Yes. That's a great one.
And also, yeah, I mean, I think you can test guys on simply keeping their word, you know, simply doing what they said they're going to do. And then, you know, if they don't, I mean, I think we all go through phases in our life maybe where, you know, if you're in a state of change, if you're questioning everything that you're doing, if everything's in transformation, that's one thing, you know. I mean, I think in times in our life, there's reason to question our commitments and the society that we live in, and maybe the religion we grew up inside of, and all these sorts of things, and you start to question these things that you're committed to. That's one thing.
It's like you say, is the disappearing, is the not addressing of the issue. That is the problem.
Yes. Yes. And there's plenty of women out there who have to deal with those kind of men. Uh-huh. And it's miserable. They very much know what we're talking about, you know?
Wow. I'm thinking now, this is maybe off on a tangent, you know? But maybe those men, like trying to understand them, maybe those men, they feel it's addressed with me. Like, think of Joe. Mm-hmm. He feels it's addressed with me. He addressed it.
Did he? How did he address it?
Well, maybe he thinks I said it when talking to him, or, you know, once, or whatever.
He said what?
Well, at some points we talked about this thing, you know, and I don't feel like it's addressed, but maybe he does, you know. So maybe he would think I addressed it. I told him I need money for my family to feed my children, and then it's addressed to him, and I think he's not addressing it. He thinks it's addressed, you know, and.
I don't know, if you didn't agree to let it go, or you didn't forgive it, or if you didn't whatever, sure, maybe he's rationalizing something, right? But it's a very squirrely, weaselly thing to just, you know, if it's not addressed with you and you're clear that it's not addressed, you know, I don't see how it could be clearly resolved for him except with some kind of whatever excuse he's making for it. And if he's making an excuse with you for doing that to you, he's doing it in other places in his life. Mm-hmm. He's doing it in a relationship with his wife. He's doing it in business still. This
is a great exploration. Like what I hear from you, and these things are new, is a great way to see whether you go in a deal or a friendship or an allyship or a business with a guy, is look if he has brothers. That's a great, great practical thing. And then this is great too. If you're wondering...
Also the relationship with the father. How is
yes,
that?
Yes. Yeah, that too. And then the last thing I think is great is... what did you just say? Because I'm trying to understand him and I'm trying to walk his shoes and I'm thinking, maybe he thinks it's addressed. And you say, no, it's important that the other thinks it's addressed. So surely he must know, surely he knows that I think it's unaddressed.
Yes.
So.
Well, I can think of men who also don't have a good relationship with their father, but maybe their father was a weaker man, or a man who in some ways they judge him as being that. Mm. And then they are kind of the opposite. They become super hard. And those might be the ones much more likely to, when the conflict comes, to be so hard about it, they're like, fuck the other side. And they can just in the warrior mode, let's say. So, and both are problematic, but both are related to the judgment of the father. Mm. Yeah.
Interesting. So what do we do about it?
And I think it's important for women too, who might be listening, about who they're choosing to be in a relationship with, about who they're choosing to have a child with, who they're going into business with as a man.
But imagine you choose the wrong one. This happens. Like I did, like your friend did. How did you address it? How can I address it?
I went to great lengths to try to resolve it, and there was no resolving it with him. It just wouldn't show up, so it's unresolved, And I forgave him. I don't believe I forgave the money, and I didn't forgive on the sense of like forgive and forget, But like if I forgave on this site, I forgave in this sense of like I'm not gonna continue to try to get it from him or whatever. Like whatever that energy is, like that it's unresolved. But if I see him, if we're both show up at the same event, like I'm not gonna protect him from public humiliation. Like I'll call him out publicly still. And that's what eventually that's what I had to come to. Do I have to, because I felt it's my responsibility to warn other people, because he wanted to work with people doing good work in the world. And this is how he is. And I found out and I was like, if this is how he is with me, who else is he doing it with? And I found another, like a guy who's helps people with spirituality and relationships and this sort of thing. And I found out that he has the same kind of thing happen with that guy. Like guys, people who are like this, it's a character thing. And I was like, well, if I don't speak up because I don't want this to play out publicly and then that affects my image and reputation and stuff like that, that was a big problem. That was a big issue for me. But in the end, I realized I have to make it public to warn other people to not hire this guy. And so I made it very public. In fact, he was like the top on the if you go to Google, the top on the first page, if you search for his name, the first few results on that page were my story about what happened. And I told him, look, we resolved this. I'll update the story. But, yeah, it was a big issue for me. And another thing that I felt that I was really challenged by, this is when I left the States, it was a big deal for me, is I tried to go to other people in the same kind of transformational leader community, because that's the kind of guys he was doing work for. And these are the guys, if you think of the guys who are really successful and kind of famous authors and teachers in the realm of personal development and spirituality and relationships and this sort of thing. The guys that belong to this, there was a group that a lot of these kind of guru types belong to, the transformational leadership group or something like this. And, I tried to go to some of those where we had relationships in common and stuff like this to get them kind of like as elders or as fellow community members to come in and help us resolve this. And I couldn't get anyone to do it. And I was judging them for that. And I was like, these guys are standing for, they say that they're standing for this. And then I look for evidence that they're really not, they're not being transformational leaders with other issues in this community. Like there was this big story of this guy who, he organized these events, and part of it involved these sweat lodge? You know, maybe if I got the name wrong. But based on the Native American practice of, you make the fire and the steam and it gets really hot. And he used this as part of his transformational events. And people ended up dying inside of this thing. And this guy was someone who was in The Secret, that kind of famous movie. Do you remember The Secret? Yeah. Anyway, so he was like a really big moneymaker and popular guy. And when this happened, all of his so-called friends and business associates who were also in The Secret and all this kind of stuff, no one either stood up for him, no one had his back. Absolutely no one had his back. But they were all promoting him beforehand. They were all vouching for him beforehand. And then the guy has no allies. Zero. And no one was even really showing up to say anything about it. They kind of all disappeared. And to me, that was just another example of, man, we're trusting these people to kind of lead us into the future. All that really had me think, and I was questioning the culture and all of this. And I wanted to go explore cultures where elders really had a role of resolving conflict. And I heard about in Somalia where, you have a conflict between someone in one tribe kills someone in another tribe. They don't do this court thing and find out who's to blame, and then it's prison and all this. The model is more about getting balance back. And so the elders from both tribes will come together and they'll figure out restitution and whatever. Anyway, I was very curious about that. That's one reason I left the States, because I realized how unjust our justice system is, because I realized I could take this guy to court, spend years, tens of thousands of dollars, never get resolution. Or if I do get judgment in my favor, if I don't run out of money in the meantime, I get judgment in my favor, he could still not pay. This could just go on. There's no justice. And then I started having violent thoughts, I can arrange justice, I've got brothers who would help with that. And I kind of felt like it would be right too. This guy is gonna, lives are at stake with some of these, things that this guy's people he's helping. He's doing business with. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like, man, in the old days when it was just a tribal situation, people wouldn't let this guy inside of their tribe. He's a betrayer. He's someone who he costs lives.
And maybe it's testament to the disappearing. It's still to this day talking about it. To this day, I'm talking about it, and it still lingers. It's incredible. What a crime! It's like a violation.
Yes.
You're still in my mind.
Yes. You're
still thinking about it. I'm trying to resolve it.
Yes.
What is a part of the resolving is this? Imagine now, I can feel you very judgmental, and I am too. But what is going on with that guy that for him this is right? What is going on for him that he thinks this is okay? Is he compromising? Is he does he feel righteous about it? What is going on?
Remember in our last conversation we talked about not having a culture of honor? I think this is a part of it. So if a guy doesn't come up inside of a brotherhood and he's got older men and there's not a way of, he's not really indoctrinated into a way of honor, of being a certain kind of man and showing up for his brothers, and he's not invited into responsibility with a call to honor, he he rejects the responsibility, and which in a way I agree with, but then he can just be left without any honor.
I understand, but that's again an explanation. Like for your
What's
guy,
going on for him?
Yeah, what is going on in his mind? Like that seems to fit, that there's no like conflict like we seem to have with it.
Well, I don't know what's going on in his mind, but from the honorman to work, he could feel like, well, maybe I already caused him enough damage by me trying to resolve it and making it public and this sort of thing that, well, he could think, well, he's never going to get the money now. Like what he did to me, that makes it even, or something like this.
Okay, well, before then, when he's not delivering to you, and then the ongoing thing.
This is, this is everyday life. People have their rationalizations. People have their stories. People.
I understand, but if we do the honor window with him, what would he say? Like, what would he say he's standing for?
Well, I mean, I could guess.
Yes.
I could guess. I mean, his business might have been in jeopardy. He might have spent the money, and it just couldn't deliver. He could have had a drug habit. And the money's gone, and maybe he's about to lose it all, have an emotional breakdown, and he's just standing for holding it all together. And he can't deal with me because it's too much. I'm too intense. He's just standing for just surviving. I mean, we could go into that and look at that. But to me, like, I still consider myself his ally. Like, I will face him. I will do the honor work with him, but I'm still going to hold him accountable. And I'm also going to hold him publicly accountable. And so to me, it's not one or the other, and I do absolutely judge that way of being. I judge that way of being. And it's, to me, it's a warning for young men, for all men and women, to watch out for guys like that who they can't be trusted.
I'm almost pissed that I brought it up again,
because it's rumbling inside you.
And he's still like, is in my thoughts. Fuck that, Fuck that, Joe Smets. Jesus.
Well, you can take that energy and have that be a stand for men, and a stand for how you're going to be in relationship, and also a stand for him that, because I would say, don't let him off the hook. Don't let him off the hook. I mean, there's an argument for forgiveness, in a way, like, and that could be a powerful process, and also for honoring and doing the honor work. But for me personally, I still, I'll keep the fire there as a stand for him to make his evolution, and a stand for other men, and a stand for myself to be someone that people can trust.
Yeah, because I have instances where I have both, I have other instances where it went sour, and I can at the same time, honor this man, and at the same time, I'm not forgetting.
Yes.
I'm not forgetting. This is not, is that part is not resolved.
Yes. Yeah, and you let that be a warning about doing business.
Yes.
Let that be a warning about, yeah. So
I'm trying to see how this conversation benefits, and the tragedy is like the only benefit I see in it is us sharing it. Like, I know that you went through it too, and I know I went through it, and that you see it. That gives some kind of a relief to it.
Yes.
But the real issue with him, with them, you know, is unresolved, you know, and I don't see really how I can resolve it.
Yeah, you know, part of the challenge is that we live in such individualistic cultures. And, you know, I come from America, and there are some really tight communities of religions and things like this. And if you're a member of these communities, you can see everyone in the community comes, if someone chooses to be this, they really get the shame, you know? And if they make it right, they get the respect, they get they get welcomed back in, so to speak. But there's these kind of consequences don't exist very much in such an individualistic society.
Yes.
Guys can just kind of forget about you, move on with their life, not have you as a Facebook friend. You know, it's just so easy to not be accountable in today's world.
In an ending note, I'm thinking about the movie. You're not gonna like it. What We Do in the Shadows, about these vampires living together. And they hold each other accountable. One is not acting like a vampire, and they shame him. They walk around him and they go, shame, 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 shame. It's so funny. But yes, that's the trouble, you know. He can be elusive. I'm very interested in what I can do. And if what I get from this conversation is I want to use it and do something more, you know, whether that is speaking to guys about it or addressing it with him again. I kind of like the idea. Maybe you should come along.
Yeah.
And bring some pliers. That's a joke. Okay?
Yeah, and I think, you know, in resolving these sorts of things, I think a healthier model, if two guys can't resolve it, to have the elders of the two guys come together for a resolution, you know? And if that can't happen, you know, then maybe there needs to be war. Brothers.
His elder is dead. And my elder is also one he took money from. Oh man, interesting.
You know, like if you guys come together, you could choose to forgive him.
Yes.
And whatever, but it's the point of a resolution.
Yes.
You know, that's what it's. That's what.
And it feels like it needs to be him addressing it. I can't be asking for it. You know. But it's interesting. Well, I'm actually happy now that we talked about it, because I feel like seen in it, and I feel like it's shared. It's a bit of the burden is gone, you know, in a way. Like you can carry along with me.
Yes.
All right. See you tomorrow.